All right. Stop scrolling, put your drink down. Actually, no, pick your drink back up. You're gonna need it because I need you to hear this one with your full chest. For one brief, beautiful, completely unhinged moment back in 1989, a soda company became one of the most powerful navies on the entire planet. Not a country, not an army, a soda company. The same people who make that fizzy brown drink you grabbed from a gas station fridge at midnight owned submarines, real ones, 17 of them, plus a cruiser, plus a frigate, plus an actual destroyer. We are talking real military war machines, sitting in the water, legally owned by a company whose entire job is selling you a sugary beverage. And look, I know exactly what you're thinking. Turbo, buddy, you finally had one too many iced coffees. You're making this up. But I swear on my entire coffee collection, every single cup, this is 100% real. Real submarines, real CEO, real Cold War tension. And the craziest part? It all happened because of money that, technically, wasn't even real money. For a second there, this drink company had more submarines than most actual countries on Earth. So, confused? Good. Stay confused for about 60 more seconds, because by the end of this video, you're gonna understand exactly how a cola ended up commanding a war fleet. Let's get into it. Okay, real quick. Hold on, let me take a sip, because my entire brain runs on cold caffeine, and I am running dangerously low. Ah, there it is. Iced coffee, the official fuel of explaining absolute chaos. Okay, we're back. We're focused. Let's go. So here's the core problem, and I'm gonna break it down the exact way I wish somebody had broken it down for me. Back during something called the Cold War, the whole world was basically split into two giant friend groups that absolutely could not stand each other. On one side, you had the United States and most of the West. That's the team rocking capitalism. On the other side, you had the Soviet Union, also called the USSR, which was this enormous communist country built around Russia. And these two friend groups did not trade with each other, did not hang out, and definitely did not share snacks across the lunch table. Now here's where the money gets weird. The Soviet Union used a currency called the ruble, and the ruble had one tiny little flaw that was actually a gigantic flaw. Outside the borders of the Soviet Union, it was basically worthless. Nobody wanted it. You could not spend it anywhere else in the world. Let me hit you with an analogy, because this is the key to the whole story. Imagine you're playing a board game with your friends and you absolutely crush it. You win a massive pile of that fake Monopoly money. You're stacking paper. You feel like a millionaire. Life is good. But then you walk into a real store, slap your Monopoly cash on the counter, and try to buy a real sandwich. The cashier just stares at you. Because that money is only real inside the game, the second you stand up from the table, it turns back into colorful little paper rectangles. That, my friends, was the Soviet ruble. Super powerful inside the USSR. Completely useless the moment you stepped 1 foot outside. So if you were an American company and the Soviets wanted to buy your stuff, you had a massive problem. They would happily pay you in money you literally could not use anywhere. So how do you do business with someone whose cash is basically Monopoly money? Simple. You don't use money at all. You go old school. You trade stuff for stuff. And that, right there, is where this entire submarine circus begins. Let's rewind all the way back to the year 1959. Picture it. Moscow, the heart of the Soviet Union. There's this big cultural exhibition happening where America basically shows up to flex its entire lifestyle right in front of the Soviets. Shiny kitchens, washing machines, color TVs. The whole, look how comfy life is over here, energy. And right in the middle of all of it, the American vice president at the time, a guy named Richard Nixon, and the Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, get into this legendary argument while standing inside a model kitchen. Historians literally named it the kitchen debate. Two of the most powerful men on the planet arguing about whose entire system of government is better, standing next to a refrigerator. Absolutely iconic. But here comes the smooth move. There was a young Pepsi executive at that exhibition named Donald Kendall, and this guy was sweating bullets because he had basically bet his whole career on getting the Soviets to notice his soda. So he pulls off the slickest marketing trick you've ever seen. He makes sure that during this huge, world-famous moment, somebody slips Khrushchev a fresh cup of Pepsi, and boom, there's the leader of the Soviet Union on camera sipping an American cola, photographers going wild, and that photo flies around the entire world. That's the kind of advertising you literally cannot buy. Now fast forward to 1972. After years of Kendall basically refusing to take no for an answer, Pepsi pulls off something nobody else on Earth had managed. It becomes the very first American product, the first one ever, to be officially sold inside the Soviet Union. And that is a gigantic deal. While two nuclear superpowers were busy pointing missiles at each other, somehow a fizzy soft drink found a secret little doorway across enemy lines. But, and you already know what I'm about to say, remember the monopoly money problem? The Soviets still couldn't pay in cash anybody wanted, so Pepsi and the USSR set up what's called a barter deal. Barter just means trading goods directly instead of using money, like swapping your sandwich for someone's chips at lunch. So here's how it worked. Pepsi would ship over its top secret syrup. That's the concentrated, goopy stuff you mix with carbonated water to actually make the drink. And in return, the Soviets paid Pepsi in vodka. Specifically, a brand called Stolichnaya. Pepsi got the exclusive rights to sell that Russian vodka over in America. So picture this, a beautiful little loop. Americans are buying Russian vodka. Russians are chugging American cola. And not a single useful dollar or ruble actually changes hands. Honestly, it's genius. And it worked. It worked so well that Pepsi became a massive, beloved thing across the entire Soviet Union, with people drinking it by the millions. For years, everybody was happy. But then the late 1980s rolled around and everything got messy. Stay with me here, because this is the part that genuinely breaks people's brains. By 1989, two big things happened at the exact same time. First, that cola-for-vodka deal was about to expire, and Pepsi wasn't just looking to renew it, they wanted to go way bigger. We're talking around $3 billion worth of business. Second, the Soviet economy was straight up falling apart, and those vodka payments alone just weren't cutting it anymore. So Pepsi flies its people back to Moscow and basically asks the big question, okay, so how exactly are you going to pay us this time? And the Soviets kind of look around at what they actually have lying around. And what does a crumbling military superpower have just casually sitting around collecting dust? Warships. So they made an offer that literally nobody on planet Earth saw coming. They said, all right, how about 17 submarines, plus a cruiser, plus a frigate, plus a destroyer? And Pepsi's CEO, Donald Kendall, looked at this entire floating war fleet and said, yeah, deal. Just like that, a soda company suddenly owned 17 submarines and 3 warships. And the legend says this briefly turned Pepsi into the 6th largest navy on the entire planet, bigger than the militaries of entire countries. And here is the cherry on top of the whole sundae. Kendall later joked to the actual US National Security Advisor, and I am barely paraphrasing here, he basically said, we're disarming the Soviet Union faster than you guys are. A cola company, casually out-negotiating the Cold War. Just let that sink in for a second. Okay, let me cool you down just a little bit, because I love a good legend. But you know me, I love the actual truth even more. And the truth here is slightly less dramatic, but honestly, somehow, still amazing. Here's the real deal. Were those submarines real? Yes, absolutely. Did Pepsi technically, legally own them? Also, yes. But were they shiny, terrifying, ready to launch war machines? Oh, absolutely not. These subs were old, like ancient, rusty, leaking, a bunch of them literally tilting over to one side. Basically, the underwater version of that one car in the neighborhood that hasn't started since 2009. Reportedly, one of the ships needed constant pumping just to stop it from sinking right there at the dock. They were so cheap that the submarines reportedly went for around $150,000 each, which, for a submarine, is basically pocket change. So this idea that Pepsi could have launched some kind of soda-fueled world domination campaign? Yeah, that part is mostly internet myth. Experts who actually sat down and counted the world's navies say a handful of rusty old subs would not have made Pepsi number 6. That 6th largest Navy line is a super fun exaggeration that got passed around the internet so many times it basically leveled up into a full-blown legend. So, what did Pepsi actually do with a fleet of decaying submarines and crusty warships? Exactly what you would do. They sold them for scrap. They handed the whole rusty fleet over to a shipyard up in Scandinavia to get chopped up and recycled into plain old metal. Pepsi was never, ever planning to sail anything. They were basically a giant middleman. Grab the ships, flip the ships, pocket a tidy little profit, and walk away. The famous Pepsi Navy really only existed on paper, and honestly, only for about the length of a blink. And the bigger picture? Well, in 1990, Pepsi went and signed an even larger deal with the Soviet Union, at the time, one of the biggest business agreements ever made between an American company and the USSR, worth billions, even involving brand new ships the Soviets would build especially for Pepsi to lease out or sell. It was shaping up to be the deal of the century. But then, history happened. In 1991, the entire Soviet Union just collapsed. Gone. The whole country that Pepsi had spent 30 years building this wild trade empire with completely dissolved into smaller, separate nations. The deals got tangled up in the chaos. Everything got messy. And eventually, Pepsi's biggest rival, Coca-Cola, came swooping into the brand new Russian market and grabbed the lead. So, in a weird way, Pepsi won the Cold War cola race, and then kind of fumbled the piece right afterward. Alright, deep breath. Let me actually land this plane, because there's a genuinely cool lesson buried underneath all of this beautiful chaos. Here's the big thing this entire story taught me. Money is not magic. Money is just trust. A dollar, a ruble, a coin, a number on a screen. It only has value because everybody silently agrees that it does. The second people stop agreeing, like what happened with that Soviet ruble, the money basically turns right back into colorful paper, and suddenly an entire country is out here paying for soda with submarines. Value is just whatever two people decide it is in that moment, and when you really sit with that, it is wild. And the second lesson, maybe my favorite one, never ever underestimate soft power. A single cola company spent 30 straight years quietly building a little bridge between two massive enemies who literally had nuclear weapons aimed at each other's faces. Sometimes, the thing that crosses the biggest, scariest walls in the world isn't a tank or an army. Sometimes, it's a snack. A tiny fizzy drink pulled off something that professional diplomats had struggled to do for decades. Now look, if your brain feels even slightly bigger than it did 10 minutes ago, if you just found out that Pepsi technically owned a navy, and now you kind of desperately want to tell every single person you've ever met, do me one tiny little favor. Go ahead and tap that subscribe button. That's it. That's the whole ask. No pressure, no begging. I'm genuinely not going to guilt trip you. But every single subscriber really does help me keep turning history's weirdest, wildest, most unhinged stories into stuff that's actually fun to watch. It's completely free, it takes about 1 second, and it honestly means the entire world to a hyperactive little sloth running purely on iced coffee. So that, my friends, is the unbelievable true story of the soda company that owned a navy. Real submarines, fake money, and one of the strangest trades the world has ever seen. I'll catch you in the very next one. And until then, stay curious.